Hey you guys, welcome to book review number 94, I believe. Today I will be reviewing Howard Jacobson's In the Land of Oz. And that's really, I don't know if you can even see that, it's so, Anyway, so Howard Jacobson, you have to accept something about the author before you can enjoy this book. And this is going to be very insulting, but it is very true. That anything good that happens in the world, it either happens to him or because of him, or somehow in relation to his ego or his being. Now, no, that's not to say that other people can't do it, but mostly they do it in service of him. Other people are good so that he can be served. Meanwhile, all of the kind of idiocy of the world, particularly in Australia, which admittingly has a lot of idiocy, is inevitably the other, is inevitably not him, is inevitably other people are idiots. And he does it kind of in a humorous way. I mean, it is condescending, but it is also very humorous. He is a humor writer. He kind of has a very good eye for that. But it gets a little bit grating at times how sort of egocentrical and self-centered the author can be in this book. That being said, he has a tremendous eye to see kind of the foibles of everyday life in Australia, kind of the everyman and his struggles, kind of, it's not that this isn't true, but he really does a good job of pointing out kind of the guy in the jumper, which is like the equivalent of like a muscle beater or a wife beater shirt in the United States, or like just a cutoff shirt, with his basic shorts, like gym shorts, and really not kind of aspiring to any higher culture, just kind of drinking the beer and being the guy. And he kind of observes those people and laughs at them, but also kind of shows some endearing side to them, albeit after laughing at them quite a bit. Other things, well, I guess I should kind of give the route that he goes along. I think that would be the best way to describe this book, because it is very linear in the route that he goes. He doesn't kind of move around in time or talk about stuff outside of kind of the context of the places that he's at. So he starts at the top end in the Northern Territories, goes to Darwin, talks about how, the hurricane, or typhoon, I believe that it's called, can't really remember the name of it, but in '95 completely destroyed it. And the sort of weird side effect, the freakonomics side effect of this, was that the area got completely redeveloped by people that largely had no soul. It felt like shopping mall, blah, 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 casino, blah, 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 just kind of run of the mill. It was losing a lot of its character. That being said, you may be able to, put lipstick on a cow, but it's still a cow. So he really kind of points out the really kind of rough character of people at the top end. This is, I'd probably say through the book, he kind of talks about those kind of people, but particularly in the first part, when he's looking for humor, when he's looking particularly at the bus drivers who have this kind of overly enthusiastic story of Schadenfreude, of numerous stories about, there's like the bathrooms on the back of the buses, or the loos on the back of the buses that, like the bus driver, I specifically remember, would like tell a story where this didn't happen to him, but he would like tell a story that, you have to make sure that you lock the door, because if the door isn't locked and the bus has to stop, you will literally fly out pants around your ankles, into the main part of the bus. And it was actually a competition among some bus drivers to see how far, if they braked hard, they could get a person who had not locked the door to fly out into the aisle, and how far up the bus that they could get doing that. He also talks about Aborigines, because he's traveling mostly through the back parts of Australia. Played a pretty predominant role in this. He kind of mentions how in the Northern Territories, particularly in the town of Jambiru, basically uranium mining interests have created this sort of glossed over version. And unlike Darwin, which is an actual city, it's almost like, what is it? that movie with Will Smith that like everybody dies, but then everything is still preserved or something, like The Last Man or whatever. It's kind of like that. Like he sees people, but the town just feels completely languid. Uh, you know, there's just no action. It's just all subsidized by the uranium mines. Goes down to Catherine, sees one of the worst bar fights that he's ever seen in his entire life. People just fight all the time in Catherine. Yeah, it's kind of like a way station between the actual city of Darwin and where nobody lives, so there's no reason to fight if nobody lives there. So yeah, just the true roughness of that. Sees kind of the beauty of Kumaramama. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong, but it's in the Kimberley in Western Australia. Goes on a big road trip there with somebody that is kind of. He's not really running a scheme, but his business is failing, and he kind of has to oversell to make up for that. Sees Broome, sees the Cable Beach at Broome, sees Derby, describes that as another pie hole. Then really kind of in quick order goes down the coast to Perth. Perth he describes as languid, not more in a positive way, in the way that like a very prosperous town because of mining interests that has excess money and not enough time to do anything with it, but still has a little bit of the British reserve, so it won't just become like ostentatious. Spend their time kind of gossiping about who has what real estate, specifically how close it is to the Swan River and the Swan River estuaries. A lot of gossip about that. Talks extensively about the wine in the Margaret River region, one of the two wine valleys that he goes to. Let's see. Can't really remember what he did in like Albany. Basically just like kind of drove along the coast, stuff like that. Goes up to Kilgore, sees, you know, the prostitutes, all that, yada, yada, yada. Then takes the Nullarbor all the way across to Adelaide. Yeah, I'm just kind of listing things here, but this is pretty much what he does. Sees where the Queen of England stopped in a town of about 50 people in the 1940s. Or no, it wasn't the Queen of England. It wasn't Victoria, but it was like one of the crown princes. I think it was during World War II, too, to kind of raise morale. And she actually, or he or she, I forget, some royalty from Britain, actually met with Aborigines who a local missionary had to convince the Aborigines not to kill this random woman that was like a big royalty in Britain. Not necessarily because they knew she was and it would be some sort of like political statement if she did, but they just didn't like the way she looked. And so they were just going to kill her, you know. Of course, this is, you know, you don't want to be condescending to Aborigines, but like, I mean, that was their mentality. They were just like, oh, we don't like this person, we're going to kill them. And the missionary had to convince them to actually do the folk dances and play nice. And they were eventually given, you know, like grain subsidies for what they did, so they were happy in the end. Moves on to Adelaide, a lot more wine drinking there, Bassra region. Describes Adelaide as another kind of languid city, a little less wealthy, maybe a little more parklandy than Perth. Specifically, less gossip about like who has money in Adelaide. That was the big thing that they did in Perth. Then kind of hits the real outback. Talks about taking this camper van that they rented in Adelaide and eventually gave up in Alice Springs up the Stewart Highway. Them going, now the Stewart Highway, this book was written in 1987, so it's a little bit dated. But the Stewart Highway now being, you know, a tarmac of pristine condition that you can drive any or a two-wheel drive sedan through. You know, you'll have your regular car problems. But actually, this book, this journey, was done a month before that highway opened up in the mid-'80s. So he took a camper van along the old highway, and he said it was almost like well, he didn't say Mad Max, but what comes to mind in my mind is like Mad Max of all these vehicles that kind of travel together so that if one breaks down, you know, through the outback of Australia, so if one breaks down, not that they can murder them, but that there's kind of strength in numbers. And it was almost kind of a daily entertainment to get away from the mass planes, lack of change of interest in order to help these people out along the way. And you could also pretend that you were an expert even if you weren't, by just sitting there with one of other 50, maybe not 50, maybe like 20 people, looking at someone's tire that popped out and saying, oh, well, why did that happen? It goes up to Coober Pedy. Coober Pedy being a really interesting place in that it really shouldn't exist. It really is kind of environmentally and climatically one of the shitholes of Australia. It's just super hot, super dry. You can't grow anything there. There's really no reason for people to live there, other than the gem industry and opals. Yeah, opal. The opal industry that exists in Coober Pedy kind of attracts the loose change of society for people that try to, want to make their fortune overnight. And it's both the inspired and the lazy, if you will, that tend to move to Coober Pedy. All the towns are below ground. Of course, there's a lot of fighting there because it's outback Australia where people shouldn't really be living. He mentioned that there's an Air Force base near there too, and kind of one of the more interesting stories, I guess, because I'm an American. He talks about some Americans that were stationed there and just how they did not, they thought because they had the frontiering spirit of the United States, compared to, say, like Europe, not to be condescending to Europe, but there's that frontier mentality in the United States that, oh, we can go to the middle of Australia as part of a military assignment and we'll make it. But the people that were there really kind of, it sunk in how desolate the middle of Australia is, particularly when they're on some bombing range, not close to any city whatsoever. Next, he goes up to, does he go to Alice Springs or Ayers Rock next? I think he goes to Ayers Rock. And the really cool thing that I liked about Ayers Rock is, he kind of covered sort of the history. He met some hippies that were kind of traveling around Australia near Ayers Rock, kind of talked about the Aborigine history of Ayers Rock and whether the people that are getting nominal control are actually doing it. There was a little bit of a front put on by the Australian government to give Ayers Rock back to, or what is now Uluru, that's the Aborigines' name, which I should be calling, give Uluru back to the Aborigines, but the tribe that they actually gave it to had no real association with Ayers Rock, and really they gave it back and then immediately leased it back to the Australian government for tourist and park purposes on a 99-year lease for a relatively small amount of money. So it was more just kind of a nominal, it's back in the hands of the Aborigines, when it really wasn't. Now, I haven't done any research, it might have changed since then, but that was the first foot put forward by the Australian government, was this sort of kind of exploitative, under the table giving back of a very historical religious site to the Aborigines people, only to be continually used as a tourist attraction. The other thing that I thought was really cool about Ayers Rock, and this goes exactly against what I just said, is I kind of like little bars or just kind of interesting spots. And they said that the town that Ayers Rock was close to, and it's not mentioned on this map, I think it starts with a Y, like Yaluna or something. But anyway, it's essentially a service town that exists solely for tourism to Ayers Rock. And they said that there's a particular bar in town called the Sunset Bar. And I always thought of Ayers Rock in the middle of the day. Oh, you're climbing it, you're going around it. But actually, if you sit at a certain angle, you can watch the sun go down over the back of Ayers Rock to the point where it wouldn't be beyond the horizon if it wasn't behind the rock. So what you get is you get the rock, and then you get this stream of light that's flowing out in all directions behind the rock. And I just thought, man, that would just be a cool place to go. Just see that, man. That would just be like like a sunset in Ibiza or something, just how cool it is. He mentions kind of some of the people that go there, both the timid and the overly jacked up. Some family whose children are whipping them. They have like 6 kids and are just can only marginally enjoy things because they're always just having to put up with their kids and just look defeated. And then the other person he met there was this guy that has this, I don't know what the equivalent would be, I don't know, like a Range Rover, but whatever it was like the largest kind of muscled out, super jacked up Jeep playing like heavy metal music kind of stuff. Just rocket. So yeah, around that time period, like I said, he met well, whatever the other rock formation is around Ayers Rock, which is I'm trying to forget. I can't really remember. But he met like the hippie train, and they actually kind of interwove a couple times throughout going through Australia, and he was both kind of intrigued and repelled by this group for kind of the ideals that they stood for, which he liked, but also the means by which they wished to achieve it, which was just send positive vibes out to the people that were committing these things and let those, whatever atrocities Australia has, be they a few or be they a lot, they were going to send positive vibes out to change it, and it's really going to work. But anyway, yeah, that was kind of an interesting little side thing. He actually got stuck in one of their camper vans and had to listen to like a 20-minute spiel, just like the 20-minute spiel you're listening to, about their positive vibes and everything. Next, he goes up to Alice Springs, kind of describes the weirdness of Alice Springs, and not in a good way. It's kind of like the giant social distribution point for 70% of Central Australia. Now, there are smaller distribution points at other points, but that's kind of like the culmination of the welfare state of Central Australia, particularly for like Aborigines. Now, that's not to say that Aborigines are lazy or whatever, right-wing bullshit you want to fill in there. But it just means that that's kind of the social circumstance of what it is that a lot of Aborigines have to kind of live on the social good graces of the Australian government. Now, that being part of the reason that being is because alcohol was introduced by white people, because farming techniques in Central Australia left a lot of the traditional sort of hunting and gathering as an impossible option for many Aborigines, because modernity in everything that it does good is a more shiny set of keys than what traditional life is, and so the families are constantly kind of torn between those two. And he actually goes to a reservation which is called Aryunga, and kind of talks about the priests that people both loved, but even though he was a little, I don't know, he did the job that he was sent there to do, but Howard Jacobson being I have to remember the guy's name, Howard Jacobson being a cynic, says, oh, well, this guy kind of, he helped you in a way, but he also got you kind of in his dole too, kind of pushed his own agenda. Next he goes, completely leaves the state, goes up to Mount Isa, and with some trepidation heads into Queensland, which he is initially a little leery about because of the presupposed right-wing politics of Queensland, but really winds up enjoying, mostly because of the tropical lifestyle, the drinking coconuts, laying on the beach, reading a book, not doing anything. But in this lifestyle, as in that lifestyle anywhere on earth, kind of these small things of life creep in, and I wouldn't say ruin, but just kind of, like, he notices that the staff are kind of always squawking at one another, or he mentions a guy that, he goes to the Great Barrier Reef in Cairns, that is his best mate when they're on the reef together. He hired it. He's a employee, and Howard Jacobson is paying to go on this cruise. Well, he later sees this guy in a bar, and not only does the guy not make eye contact, even though he knows he's there, Howard is there, he says nothing, completely ignores him. It's as if the daily conversation they had 5 hours ago, when he was a paying customer, is just non-existent. So, that's kind of like what you get when you get the service industry types, if you will. Goes to Green Island, goes to Magnetic Island, which is off Townsville, kind of has to re-edit a paper there. goes to a peace festival that he actually enjoys for the most part. Kind of, it's not so much like a true hippie enclave, it's more like a kind of local high school and grade school performance set that people have been preparing for, and then kind of has the peace thing overlaid with that. That being in contrast to sort of the developing class, or those being the money class, the development kind of cynical class, but also the kind of redneck class that just like fuck the Aborigines and all that stuff, which he mostly avoids, which is probably a smart move. You know, you're not going to get that much variance in opinion among those people. They're kind of insular. Kind of heads down to Brisbane, sees Sydney, sees Hobart. Kind of mentions that the biggest difference between the East Coast and the rest of Australia is how much the East Coast, how vibrant it is, but also how much they make you feel like you're a real badass. And I mean that in a good way, like, oh, you devil, oh, you'd do that, wouldn't you? And, you know, kind of building up your ego up, not in a false way, as it would be maybe in Cairns if you were a paying customer, but even among friends. Whereas kind of in the more economically depressed areas, people tend to be a little more blunt with, or, you know, come forward a little bit more with their criticism and lack of mateship. Mateship is harder to come across in an area that's economically declined. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Like I said in the very beginning, the biggest criticism is just his observations are so good, but they're so self-centered and egomaniacally driven. Like, the name of the book is In the Land of Oz. Oh, I know what it was. It's got that little heart thing that has the Australia on it, but sometimes it's like, do you really, or do you just like it because it's easy to criticize? So, I don't know, maybe I'm being overly critical there, but anyway, great observations, and yeah, I'd say this along with Bill Bryson's book, even more so actually than Bill Bryson's book, are really good observers. He has I didn't really cover it that well because I mostly just went over the events that he went in, but he has a very keen eye for what makes Australia Australia and what makes it unique, interesting, good, bad, just kind of really gets to the heart of what Australia is. So anyway, In the Land of Oz by Howard Jacobson. Check it out, you guys.